I am so excited to introduce to you the Strong Interest Inventory. Hopefully you've gotten a little taste of it from the previous videos and also identified what theme is closest to you in terms of the RISAC codes. And the RISAC code is actually just an easy way to identify themes based on the research done for career interests. And that's what this is. It's an interest assessment. And it's not based on your abilities or your skills. The second page of your, well, I guess it's page 2 of the profile really breaks down how you can benefit from this assessment. And so I'm not going to dive into that a whole bunch. And then it also explains to you how the results are organized. And so we're going to dive into each one of these just a little bit, give you a little taste. But the beauty of the Strong Interest Inventory is that it is super simple to interpret when it's easy, right? There's so much depth and layering in these results that to the initial read that you're going to do for this basic assignment this week, it's going to give you a good overview and hopefully line up with what you feel like you can relate to. But there is a lot of depth and a lot of interpretation that goes on kind of behind the scenes. And if it's not lining up quite right for you, I'm definitely happy to meet with you or talk with you one-on-one or even do a Google Hangout or something where we can really work through some of the questions that you might have. So again, I just want to reiterate, this focuses on your interests and how you answered the questions the day you answered them. If the day you answered them online when we did the online assessment was a typical day, normal life, good place, your results are going to be typical, normal, real, right? If you were not in a good place or maybe you rushed through it just because it was an assignment, it may not hold as much weight as it would have if you would have done it in a more quality manner. So as we scroll through, page 3 breaks down your general occupational themes. That's that RISAC code into 6 broad interest patterns. And we're looking at my profile, and I feel like my profile hit me straight on, but it organizes it in a way that applied to me. So yours is going to look a little bit different, at least organized differently. Now these scores are based on a combination of men and women, working adults, working in fields with the interests and the same questions kind of thing that they've identified, and they line you up. Strong's goal is to line you up with people who are in those industries who say they like the same things that you do in terms of interests, and they're happy in their jobs. They've reported job satisfaction, and so you might feel satisfaction in that industry too because your interests are similar. So that is kind of the base of this whole thing. So my results were SCE-RAI, and my theme code was SCE. Yours might be 1 letter, 2 letters, 3 letters. It just really depends on how you kind of scored in comparison to other men and women in these similar themes. So according to other men and women, this is a standard score, not a percentage. And so it's not, 60%. I scored very high in comparison with people who were that, in the general population. And I had very little in common with people who scored high in investigative. So that's what this area talks about. In the basic interest scales, it breaks down it's different than the occupational themes, although you can see those themes here are related. But this is what kind of areas are going to bring you a lot of motivation and personal satisfaction. And so these were careers, right, or jobs or areas in which you might have strong interest, okay, or little interest, and I think these are right on for me. And again, these are not compared to the overall population. These are compared to people of your gender. So this is comparing my score to other women who scored high in this area, I have very high correlation with their interests, and maybe moderate correlation with those interests. And it just breaks down each of those theme codes. The occupational scales is a breakdown of 130 occupations, and it goes through a whole bunch, and you'll see lots of profile jargon, basically, about what you seem to line up with better rather than others. But the occupations here that are listed are how similar your interests of those people of your gender who are working in and satisfied in that occupation. So I scored very similar to people who are community service directors or paralegals. These are so interesting because I never even thought about being a paralegal or a Parks and Recreation manager. I happen to be a career counselor. I love junior high students. So there's a bunch of things that I really relate to here. And this might just give you a little bit of a broad, like, oh, I never knew that career existed, or maybe that I even lined up with people who like that job. And so the cool thing too, I'm not sure if you remember ONET. It's a website that I had you go on for the online educational planning resource assignment towards the beginning of the semester. This can link straight to that website. Oh, it's trying to block me from it, so I'm just going to stop doing it so I don't mess up my recording. But that links directly to that job description on the ONET, so you can see what that person makes, what the industry's requiring in terms of education, or if that's a growing industry or a not growing industry. So anyways, it's a great resource to just have that direct link. Let's see here. It also lists some dissimilar interests, and I completely agree with those. Not that I don't like pets or doctors, but I don't want to be them myself. So that is the occupational scales. One of my favorite experiences with the strong in this area was that I had a student who did this, and she was very determined that she wanted to be a biology professor because she was so inspired by her biology teacher here, Ms. Miller. And I think that is an amazing goal. She loved botany, especially plant biology. And yet her occupation codes primarily came up with forestry and natural resources. And her RISAC code, the realistic, was super high, which was, outside, working with your hands, doing things really applied. And she's like, okay, this is so interesting that a forestry person is high on my list. And so we looked at her educational plan and where her areas of general ed haven't yet been completed. And we found a hole in one of the general ed areas that included a forestry and natural resources class called environmental conservation. So she's like, why not? Maybe I'll take it and see what it's like. She ended up loving the class, and it also opened a door for her. She ended up getting a certificate, and it opened a door to her getting a job in ACRT. And I don't know what that stands for, but what I do know is that she goes out and surveys trees, especially for all the tree mortality that's going on in our area. She gets to go out and survey the land and determine whether or not, a tree needs to be taken down or not, depending on its health. And what an amazing thing. And she loves it. It's, she hasn't got her bachelor's degree yet to pursue that professorship, but she is loving what she's doing currently and knows it's going to help her as she goes on to further study. So there's all kinds of things that this strong interest inventory can just bring up. Just ideas or thoughts, or even just a class that you can take that's related to something. And that's where my role comes in, of how do I help you relate that to something you can use, right? Or your counselor here. It doesn't have to be me. The occupational scales, again, just take down each one of those things with all those 130 jobs. And so it lists out your similar interest with your gender in those jobs. Again, not a Percentile is a standard score, which just means you can't read the number really accurately. Okay. Let's see here. So you scroll down through all of those for those occupational scales. You can see I am not aligned with these areas at all. And I would totally agree. Look at even negative 30. I do not want to be a physicist. Do not put me in an astronomy class. Okay. I'm very thankful for those people, though, and people with those gifts. Personal style scales is about how you approach working with people or learning or assessing risk and participating in teams. And it's just indicating whether you have a clear preference or not, or maybe somewhere in the middle. You can go either way. And sometimes this can just help you determine what kind of working environment you prefer, so you can choose an appropriate career. Page 10 is a summary of all those things we just went through, which is handy when you're trying to answer things like the questions for the week, right? And then this little section 6 is really just for interpretation purposes for me, to make sure it's a valid interpretation. As you go on, it tells you actually how to use this, right? How do you actually interpret these in things that can help you, like typical college majors, or using your basic interest scales to determine what kind of organizations might be good fits for you, or job settings, or even college courses that might help you determine whether you're interested in it or not. And then the last pages are about the occupational scales. So those 10 jobs that they list out in particular, with whom I share common interests with, and those people are satisfied in their jobs. And I love this page because it uses your theme codes to break it down, but it also tells you what educational preparation is needed for that job, what college courses will help you line up with that job, and then actual careers that line up with that education preparation. So many times I hear students, oh, I want to be a business major. I was like, okay, well, what do you want to do with that business major? Well, I don't know. And so here it is, it's a bachelor's or master's in liberal arts or business. Here's some courses that I might be taking along with that major. And here are some actual jobs that I can have that are related to that community service director. And I can maybe then go out and explore what's out there for those different jobs now that I know what degree I'm lining it up with. Anyways, super useful tool, I think. I think this would have really helped me in college. Just kind of map out, okay, I know I want to be a counselor, an educational counselor, career counselor. I need a master's degree. Okay, what pursuit, what general direction? I was a psychology major, so that lines up well, right? Some of the other professions in our counseling office are sociologists or education majors. They all went this path, landed in this path, and are now having these jobs, right, as a career counselor or educational counselor or coach of some sort in personal life development, teaching guidance courses, right? It's pretty cool, So hopefully this is a useful tool for you, and I am going to explain your assignment and how you use this profile in your assignment in the next video.